Welcome to the Writer's Den. I'm Jane Waters Thomas, and with me today is historian, speaker, educator, and definitely author, Mr. Lloyd Harris. Welcome.
Thank you.
Well, today we're going to talk a little bit about what it takes to be a historian and to write about historical matter, because that's certainly a little bit different than writing fiction.
Absolutely.
So.
One of the first things is an interest in history, if you're writing a historical book.
Absolutely.
And it involves people, events, places, and how things that are tangible touch the lives of people, either whether it's a building, a place, an event.
Now, your book, Images of America, Bartow, is specifically about this region in Polk County, Florida, Bartow, Florida.
The book is about Bartow. It spans from the earliest history of Bartow with narrative from October 1851. And the book itself only goes as far into our present time through the bicentennial. I took that as there had to be a closing for the book, and so I took the beginning of Bartow with the Fort Blount, which was an early stockade that was built for pioneers, and I chose to end it with the bicentennial project that Bartow had, and that was to build a replica of Fort Blount. So within the book, it goes from 1851 through 1976, which was the nation's bicentennial, and the Bartow Project, Fort Blount to Fort Blount.
How exciting. And when you were writing this now, Odell Robinson sort of inspired you to start writing this book. You know, did you just wake up one morning and go, this is what I'm going to do? I'm just going to write this book.
I had always wanted to write a book about Bartow, and presently I'm gathering materials to write a more definitive history of Bartow. Arcadia Publishing has a series called Images of America, and the books are roughly 125 pages long, about 150 photographs, captions, no more words than 75. Also with a narrative introduction, and divided into chapters of different aspects and things. But I didn't just wake up and say, oh, I want to write a book. Odell Robinson was the secretary to the Polk County Historical Association. I've been a member of that association since 1974, have always had an interest in history, and he called me on the phone and he said that the association had been approached several times by Arcadia Publishing looking for a local author. And other people that he had approached said, no, we don't really think we could get involved with this because it is a lengthy process. So he asked me, he says, are you interested? And I said, I think it's right up my alley, and yes, I'll do it. So he gave me the contacts. I contacted the publisher, and the rest is now history. So
well,
we actually have a book.
Very exciting, and you know, you're actually published, which that's nothing like self-publishing at all. There's some real rules and guidelines that go along with publishing. Was there ever a time where you thought, man, maybe I should self-publish this as opposed to publish this, or was that just never even a thought?
I never thought about the self-publishing or what they call vanity presses. I was happy that they were the publisher and that they did all that. So really when you are accepted as an author with a publishing house or company, it really cuts out a lot in the middle. Not only expenses and such, but they also have assistance, technical assistance that they provide, which creates their end product, which is this particular series of books. You know, when I took on the project, I had to create a format. I had to send things to them, and they reviewed it to see if they wanted me basically to be a horse in their stable. So once they saw you had to give them examples of your writing ability, interpretation of photographs, and an overview of the project, which that is for the author to choose. And so once I formatted it, gave them some examples, they accepted me as an author with this particular project. Then that project's assigned to an editor at their company, and then the editor follows you through the progress of the writing. And of course there are contracts and stuff that have to be read and signed, and time frames, and such as that. And you have to meet their abilities.
Absolutely. And I was just going to say that I know, with publishers, there's some real deadlines that are involved with a publisher as opposed to a vanity press or a self-publishing agency. And so did you find when you were writing, because this is history, so this isn't you go into your writer's den at home and crank out, 10,000 words of what's in your head. It needs to be extremely factual, and there's a lot of research involved in this. So were the deadlines at all challenging for you as you went through the process?
In one respect they were, simply because I'm not an author full-time. So I had to squeeze this in on weekends and at nights and putting it together. There is one thing that I tried to stress, and that is that being a history book, it does have to be factual. So with every story, with every interpretation of a photograph, if there's a sideline story that goes with a photograph. For instance, the cover photograph has a locomotive. Well, it's more than just to call it a train. Mm-hmm. So you have to check facts, check, and double check is what I did to make sure that everything in that particular book is factual and not based on just a story or this is what Sally said it might be or whatever. So everything is checked and historical. As to the number of words and such, with this particular series, I didn't have the liberty to flood it with history of the events and the people and the places that are involved within the chapters of the book. This particular series has parameters for writing, and they have writing guidelines, of course, like all publishers do. And so it was somewhat restrictive. And that was also a challenge because for each place, people, event, I could write 3 or 4 exhaustive pages, single-spaced about what's going on in that.
Right.
And it had to be honed down to 75 words or less. And so for me, that was the biggest challenge, was to tell the story with few words.
I bet that would be a challenge, especially since this is home.
It is.
This is home. And so yes, it's history, but there's a lot of emotion, there's a lot of personal, and and when you and I first really got to talking, you're the second Lloyd, so you have a rich history in your family in this community as well. So how has that helped influence some of the writing for your book and for maybe what's coming up in other books?
Well, for me, personally, family has a lot to do with it. My family came to Bartow around 1920. My grandfather moved here from South Georgia, ended up working in being the superintendent of the local ice plant. But the big thing that I got rewarding for me from family was both of my grandfathers. They both loved to talk about stories and old times. And so I was just absorbed in that flavor of sitting at the ice plant, hearing Granddad spin tales. My other grandfather was a minister and an educator, and so he loved ancient history, so I got both ancient history and local, from the basically pioneer history from the other granddad. And so my parents also were very much involved in taking me places, inspiring me. If it was a whim to go see where the Dade battlefield was at, Mom would put me in the car, and after school we'd ride to Brooksville or outside there and actually go out to the battlefield. And they allowed me. And every historical marker on a vacation we stopped and read, and so the family just, they were into it as well. I had a lot of influence in local history due to several things. Teachers in school, Vivian Utzi, 4th grade, Mrs. Samuel Dunn in 8th grade history classes. And one thing that I loved in history class, especially in that 4th grade class, we had a history book that told a story from pioneer families going into the wilderness all the way up through the Industrial Revolution up to modern times. And so the Bartow book basically covers that same format. It starts with the wilderness and ends up with the city.
So you had a great example,
a lot of good examples
of how to really put this together and make this make sense. There's 8 chapters in your book, and was there one period specifically that you just loved that was really maybe the hardest one to write for shutting down words?
My particular interest would be the earlier history of Bartow from the pioneer time through the 1880s when the trains arrived and the city starts becoming a city. But the time that I really loved focusing on was 1900 through the 1920s, which really is another period of growth for Bartow as well as Polk County. And I enjoyed doing the book because versus the Civil War and the pioneer era, I had tons of information that I've collected over many years. When it came to Bartow's history in that early 20th century time frame, I had to go digging. So that was the fun part for me. I love doing the research. I love tracking the rabbit, so to speak, going down the different trails and then developing the story. Now, in this type of book, the one thing that helps develop the story, though, is the photograph. So there's, with the photographs, part of building a book of photo history is gathering the images. And so that was a task in itself. Other things that prompted me, one of the earliest things was every Thursday in our newspaper, local newspaper, Louise Frisbee, also a local historian and editor and the wife of the owner of the Polk County Democrat here, inspired me as a young fellow reading the pioneer section. Every Thursday newspaper had pioneers. And of course it was a photograph and told a story. And so I kind of grew up with that format of reading the paper, looking forward to the next issue, and then going out back then when I was young on the bicycle to look at these places and taking it in. And so it was fun doing that.
Now, one of the things that, you know, we're talking to you today because you're a brilliant author and we know that you're well read locally, but you're also an educator and you take those stories and that history into classrooms for the next generation to take with them. What are some of the things that you realize as a young boy growing up, loving history? What are some of the differences you realize in your generation and history and the reception of history compared to today's generation in the classroom as you're beginning to teach these things, and how is it being received?
In my particular class, I teach Leadership Education Training, Junior Reserve Officer Training Corps, JROTC, at Summerlin Academy. The average student in our generation, most people aren't really keen on history. And so what I try to do is to develop a sense of, oh, that's unique, that's interesting, I want to know more. And so I think being able to communicate that, being inspired by it, and knowing a little bit more than what you're going to read in the text helps to influence this new generation. And I think that if you talk to some of my students, sometimes it's a little embarrassing for me because the things that they remember are the history side of my class, rather than the leadership education that they're supposed to get. They got that too, but the thing they know that I love is history, and I really can say that when I'm in front of the class, probably 90% of them are on the edge of their seat waiting to hear the next part. And
yes.
So that's inspiring.
Well, you're a brilliant speaker, and I've heard you many times. Folks from around the Polk County region, we hear you from time to time speak. And in speaking, that is the thing that you're able to do, is hang people to the edge of their seat going, what is he going to say next? What is he going to say next? And in circles that you're working within, one of the things I often hear is, man, he knows more stuff about things in this area. That's got to feel really good, considering you've spent your life learning and sort of regurgitating and making it make sense, and then sharing it with everyone. That really is the reputation that you have, is that you are the historian locally.
That is awe-inspiring for me. But I have come to the place in not only being in different historical associations and giving speeches and talks and such as that, but I really have become locally the kind of go-to guy when they want, if it deals with history. So I'm amazed that the emails that I get, that the invitations I get to go and speak and such are even predate the book. But yes, it is inspiring for me and rewarding. To know that my whole life I've loved history, and I've collected these histories in extensive files, and I think one thing that hinges to that is just a good memory and a keen eye for detail. And so I'm blessed with both. And so when somebody says, oh, well, that didn't happen, and if I say, I think it did, I have the ability to go find out and to say, not to prove them wrong or anything, but just to set the story straight, so to speak, that yes, that's a detail that wasn't there. And the other good thing too about history is I try to focus on everything around it, so that you get as a true historian, you're not getting a slanted view, but you can get the full view and then base the opinion or the historical statement on that. So facts, facts, facts. And then how it influences people and our lives.
Did you have any stories that, man, you wanted to be able to add to your book that you just couldn't prove and were not something you could put in based on that?
I don't think I did. The one thing that was kind of like I wanted to break out bigger than what the parameters that were set were to tell others. In collecting the photographs for this particular project, I collected probably somewhere between 600 and 700 photographs, both from the state archives, from local families, from my own collection, and there's so much more that can be told. I'm waiting for book number 2, 3, 4, and 5, rather than just that. So for me, that's the big thing, is there's more to be told. I don't think there was any one thing that I felt like I didn't put in the book that should have been there. But I chose to put the book together using decades and events, rather than subjects like churches, schools, government, transportation, which some of those books do. Some just simply use a chronological order. I tried to take Bartow's history and break it into events, and then to collect the photographs and the stories that deal around that event. For instance, the first one is like pioneers. I took some spins on things local, like I think one of the chapters was called Rus in Urbe, which is the motto of the city of Bartow, which means a city in the country. And so when you read the book, there's a lot of little details that come out that you may never realize that that's what that is until you're maybe sitting in a Kiwanis club somewhere and you hear somebody else speaking and you'll say, oh, I think I know that already.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it's
That all
here.
makes
Yeah, it all
sense.
comes together.
Yeah.
So
Well,
that's what's great about writing a little history book like this.
Well, and it's a fast read, which is kind of nice.
It is.
It's fast. It's very interesting. There's lots of photos. You know, this book spans 1851 to 1976. So
Yes.
as you go into your second book, which I have to imagine you're somewhere in that now, or the third or the fourth, you know, what does the second book look like? We've gone through 1976. Are you going to go back and tell greater stories from some of those other decades, or what will that look like?
The project that I've got my feet into right now is a definitive history of Bartow. Hopefully it'll be about somewhere around 250 pages to 300 pages. It will be a history of Bartow, not so much a photo history. So you'll get more in-depth coverage on the events that you might have being seen in there. My idea for that would be to come up through about 2000 with Bartow's history. So it would give you a little fuller explanation and a little bit more enlightenment as to the stories behind, well, when we had this event happen in Bartow, these are the events that led up to it, these are the people that influenced it, this is the result of it, which is what a history should do, I think.
Absolutely.
And inspire you to dig more. That's the big thing. And this is an easy read. It's a photo history, which makes it great. The only regret I had about it was this, and that is that when you buy the book, the photographs are about 5 by 7, 2 to a page. When you take those photographs and you have them on your computer, you can expand the photograph and check out the details. One good example of that is the fellow that I note is either the sheriff or the town marshal in Bartow. You would never know that looking at the photograph, but when you take it digitally on a computer and you blow it up, he's got a badge on his chest. And at the time of that particular photograph, there's only 2 people in Bartow that would have had a badge. We had a town marshal and a county sheriff. He's one of the 2.
Interesting.
So those kind of things make it unique and also rewarding.
And it makes it exciting. It's local, it's our history, it's what's going on and what has gone on to make us who we are today. I am excited to see the second book and get us through 2000 and see some of the cool things that have happened in the now generation, as it were.
Yes.
And I think that too is going to be a very interesting read. If people wanted to get a hold of you for speaking engagements, what would be the very best way for them to contact you?
Well, normally I'm not on a speaker circuit.
Okay.
However, because I am the District 2 Polk County Historical Commissioner, they can contact the History Center, and typically they will shoot me an email.
Great.
And then I'll check out the calendar and see if those opportunities are available.
Thank you so much for being with us today on The Writer's
Jane.
Den, and we look forward to your next book and many, many more to come.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Thank you for joining us on Writer's Den. We'll see you next time.